Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of Season 2 of the Cultured Pull List. This week, we'll be talking about a DC Comics Christmas story, Batman Santa Claus Silent Night, just in time for the holiday season. So, without further ado, let's get into this Santa Claus Batman story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cultured Pull List. This is your first time. Glad you're here. If you're returning, I'm also glad you're here. And thank you so much for sticking around. This is the final episode of Season 2 of the Cultured Pull List. And it's also Christmas time. The year's winding down. We're getting into the holidays. And yeah, this is going to be the last episode of the Cultured Pull List for this year. I'm going to take a couple weeks off and then be back in January. But, to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to do a Christmas themed story. And yeah, I decided to do this one. This is probably one of the most, if not, well, okay, not the most, because they actually made a sequel to this that's currently coming out, I believe. But last year, this book came out, Batman Santa Claus Silent Night. It honestly kind of flew under my radar. I knew it existed, but I kind of figured it was just going to be like a throwaway little like holiday special kind of thing, which in some respects it is, but it also has a little more to it, which I was surprised by. And I mean, there's been a lot of DC like Christmas special stuff, and I didn't like want to cover all of them because there's so many, and I'm sure not all of them are that great. So I decided to cover this one. Yeah, I actually did a poll on social media, which shameless plug. If you're not following the Cultured Poll List on social media, you should be. Yeah. So I on the Instagram I did a poll for this and for Klaus, which is a comic or a graphic novel by Grant Morrison. But this story actually won, so here we are. We're covering it. Yeah, before we get into that, I'm gonna cover the most recent comics. Not really any comic news that's like worth covering, so I'm gonna totally skip past all that. And yeah, let's get into the comics that came out this past Wednesday. So like usual, I'm only gonna do DC, Marvel, and Image. So for DC, we got Absolute Batman #3, which has been a great series so far. And this is also a key issue because it's the first appearance of Absolute Selena Kyle and the first appearance of Al, which I'm guessing is the Absolute version of Alfred. Then we have Action Comics 1080, Batman 89 Echoes #5, and yeah, Batman Santa Claus Silent Night Returns #4, which I'm guessing is the final chapter in that. Maybe I'll cover that later once that comes out in like a trade paperback. Then there's Batman Superman World's Finest #34, Catwoman #71. I'm not gonna list all of these. Dark Knights of Steel All Winter #6. Green Lantern Green Arrow World's Finest Special #1. That sounds interesting. There's Tom King's Jenny Sparks #5. Hellblazer Dead in America #11. I was actually collecting this series. I want to get back into it, but I got kind of behind. And then there's Nightwing #121 and Titans #18 and Wonder Woman #16. Oh, there's also that new series that just started recently, The Question All Along the Watchtower. The second issue came out. So, yeah, that's cool. For Marvel, we have Alligator Loki Holiday Special #1. There's Captain America #16, Conquest 2099 #5, Daredevil #16, Deadpool #9, Fantastic Four #27, Helverine #1. I guess they they reboot it because just earlier this year they came out with a Helverine miniseries. So I guess they're doing another miniseries. I'm not sure why. I only watched. I only read the first like 3 issues, 2 or 3 issues of Helverine. So I guess they're rebooting it. I don't know. There's Psylocke #2, uh, Spectacular Spider-Man #10. Then there's Ahsoka #6, which is basically just a comic retelling of the series. Now that is something that like I'm mini tangent here. That is something kind of lame that I feel like Star Wars comics have been doing is they're just kind of making they feel kind of lazy. A lot of them, like there's a few that are more like actually doing stuff like the High Republic stuff, but a lot of them are just retellings of this Disney Plus series in comic format, or retelling of like some of the novels in comic format. Like I think Thrawn Alliances was that. So I don't know. I don't know. They're kind of. I'm not really a fan of the Star Wars comics recently. And then there's the TVA #1, and which I actually I think was announced at Comic-Con and I covered on this show. And there's Ultimate Spider-Man #12, another great series so far. All the new Ultimate Spider-Man. Now for Image, I mean, there's a lot here. I don't know which is really popular when it comes to Image. So I'm just gonna like list a few of them. Like there's Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger #1, which is Gunslinger Spawn. There's G.I. Joe #2, King Spawn #40, and my friend actually collects a lot of those. And there's Spawn Kills Every Spawn #5. That sounds like Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe, kind of. And then there's The Walking Dead Deluxe number 103. So I'm guessing these are reprints of the original Walking Dead. But yeah, I'm not for certain. So yeah, enough with other stuff. Let's get into the actual book for this week here. Batman, Santa Claus, Silent Night was written by Jeff Parker with art by Michelle Bandini, Trevor Hairsine, Danny Kim, Steven Segovia, and Dan Mora did the art for all of the covers. The colorist was Alex Sinclair, and the letterer was Pat Brossow. And this is a 4-part miniseries, and they were all released in December of last year, a week apart, which doesn't happen super often anymore. You usually, if you have like a series, even if it's like a mini series or an event series, it's like a month at a time. So I found that kind of interesting. But yeah, let's get into the book here. So the story starts out with these carolers caroling in the street. They're kind of half-assing it, honestly. And then they're attacked by this winged creature, weird like bat thing. And yeah, they are unfortunately murdered. So hours later, Batman and Damian show up at the scene, and it seems like their blood was sucked out of their body. So it seems like some sort of vampire, but there aren't like teeth marks. There's only like one single bite mark on the victim's necks. So Batman calls in Zatanna, and she figures out that these things are drogs, which are like ancient Norse mythology versions of vampires. So not really, nobody's sure how those things popped up. But then one of them comes out of nowhere and attacks them and picks up Damien. As the creature's flying up in the air, it's hit with this wooden spike through the chest, which kills it. And it turns out the spike came from Santa Claus riding atop a reindeer with a crossbow. And yeah, he shows up. He starts talking to Zatanna, and Batman reveals that he and Santa Claus or I guess he kind of goes between like Santa Claus and like Klaus in this, but they, I guess, have had adventures in the past. And everyone like Zatanna and Damien are surprised by this. But across town, more of these drogs show up, and Nightwing and Batgirl start taking them down. But then they start to be overwhelmed until Santa and Batman and Zatanna and Damian show up and kill and chase off the rest of the drogs and save Nightwing. And after this battle, like there's a bit of a respite, and Zatanna uses this like ancient book, or this magic book she has, and finds, like an entry on Santa Claus. And I guess this is supposed to be a pretty accurate origin of what this version of Santa is. And I guess he in like ancient Norse times, he was a woodworker, a woodsman, and he turned into like there was this like wild hunt every year, where a bunch of commoners would group together and along with like the gods, and hunt all these crazy monsters, crazy like Norse monsters. And I guess Santa got really good at it, so he kind of started to do that like full time. And eventually he stumbles upon Krampus, and Krampus turns out to actually not be that bad of a guy. He is, obviously a monster, but all he really likes to do is scare kids for fun. He doesn't actually want to hurt them. Santa ends up bringing Krampus along as like his sidekick, and they go around giving toys to kids and just being nice while Krampus like scares the crap out of him, but for fun. And after this like history dump, we see the body of one of the drogs like sprouts this weird flower, while another one starts speaking to Santa Claus in the voice of Krampus. And then this flower spits out this like poisonous goo that hits Zatanna in the face. Meanwhile, Krampus like appears out of the chest of the dead Drog, but it turns out to just be this like hologram version of him. But now we know that Krampus is behind it, and Santa takes his Zatanna. He says he can heal her and keep her alive, and then he leaves behind this wooden box, which Batman thinks holds a message. And then we cut to Krampus, who is, we're not sure where he is, but he's being like talking to and influenced by these weird, like, they look like these ghosts or these, dead souls. So then we cut back to Batman. He took Nightwing and Damian and Batgirl to his Bat Cave and is attempting to open up the box. He manages to open it and finds a message left by Santa, and it's kind of giving more of the backstory of everything. And it explains that Krampus and Krampus and Santa Claus had this thing where Krampus would go into town and like scare the naughty children and like pretend to kidnap them until they like agreed to to be good, and then Santa would show up and just distribute presents. But as time went on, people kind of caught on and like, oh, Krampus isn't really a bad guy, he's just trying to scare us. So even the kids aren't scared of him anymore, and Krampus kind of doesn't like that because like his whole thing is that he scares kids. So he kind of grows bitter about that. But then in the middle of the message, or Santa shows up in hologram form and says like, yeah, I left this for you guys because I wanted you to know what's going on, but I didn't want to go through the memories again. So here's that. Oh, by the way, Zatanna's okay and she's resting. We managed to heal her. So then he goes away, and we see the rest of the message, which one day Krampus just kind of has enough, and he tells Santa that he took the children and he ate them. And Santa freaks out, and he uses like this stone that he's used for years to banish monsters, and he just kind of banishes, but he lashes out, so he banishes Krampus to somewhere like he doesn't even know where. But right after that, he ends up finding the kids, and it turns out Krampus, I guess, was just pulling his leg. So yeah, that's great. So he spends like a long time trying to find where he banished Krampus, and he was never able to find him. So Santa has surmised that Krampus somehow found a way out of wherever he was banished to, whatever realm or universe, and now he's releasing all of the like ancient Norse horrors that Santa and he used to like fight. So yeah, now, and I guess they kind of chalk this up to like the whole thing with night terrors and things getting mixed up with the nightmare realms. So yeah, it's kind of, it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, oh, by the way, this other event caused this. So that's how they surmise that Krampus escaped. So Batman ends up calling a bunch of Justice Leaguers to, well, I guess at this point the Justice League is disbanded. It's the Titans. But anyway, so he calls a bunch of former Justice Leaguers and friends and has them help fight these Drog, including Miss Martian, Green Arrow, and Black Canary, and they fight off like this whole swarm of Drog. Meanwhile, we see that Krampus is in the moors of Scotland, and he's releasing this whole like army of harpies. And then after everybody defeats the Drog, Superman shows up, even though Batman didn't call him, and Superman's upset because he says you never told me that you knew Santa. And yeah, Superman's a big fan of Santa, and it's like canon in some, it's kind of a running joke in some media, that some versions of Superman, that he still believes in Santa, which he's not wrong. Santa does exist in DC comics even before this story, but it's kind of a joke that he's like got childlike innocence, I guess. So then we cut to the next day, and the Harpies are attacking a bunch of people in the UK and England, I believe, and they're even fighting off the army in their helicopters. But then Hot Girl shows up and starts saving people and fighting the Harpies, as well as Joe Mullen, the Green Lantern. And then Diana, Wonder Woman, shows up. starts kicking ass, but then she's able to get her lasso around like the leader or at least one of the harpies and manages to get the information that they were they were released by Krampus, and they swore to Krampus that they would like attack, you know, people and cause a distraction, I guess. Just cause destruction. So Wonder Woman manages to convince the Harpy to stand down, so they do. Meanwhile, in a totally different location, Batman, Superman, the Nightwing, Batgirl, Blue Beetle, everybody else that's been helping shows up at this place that Santa told Batman to meet them at, and this portal opens up, and this like elf dude comes out, and his name is Peppermint John, and he works in Santa's workshop, and he like explains that Santa's elves in this story are actually like these Norse mythological beings that had no home, so Santa let them stay with him, and in return they give they provide him with services, including like helping him make nice toys and stuff. I don't remember when it was actually said, but in this universe, Santa Claus did used to go around like riding on a sleigh and delivering presents, and he knows like where everybody lives and all this. Like throughout the story, he kind of flexes on everybody and is like, I know your name and your address and what you wanted for Christmas when you were a kid. But he says that like it caught on so much, the whole giving of gifts, that people do it now without him, so he doesn't really do that anymore. I kind of forgot to mention that earlier, and I kind of forget where it comes up in the story. So yeah, so Peppermint John brings them all through the portal because Santa needs help fighting this big ass sea serpent monster. So Superman ends up smacking it around, but it's still really powerful and ends up swallowing both him and Blue Beetle. But Superman ends up flying and carrying the sea serpent away from the inside, which is kind of crazy. But while this is going on, Santa has like this sense of where Krampus is, and it keeps growing stronger. So Santa knows where Krampus is right now. So Peppermint John opens a portal, and they all go to confront Krampus, who is at this glacier in Greenland, or like not a glacier, but like this big ice wall. And it seems like he's trying to open it and free something inside, but all the heroes attack him and try to stop him. But then these spirits, ghost things that are influencing Krampus possess Superman, and they use Superman to break through the ice wall and release like all of the most powerful and dangerous monsters that Santa Claus had contained and captured in the past. So now everybody's fighting these monsters while possessed Superman is flying around and like talking about like the spirits inside are talking about vengeance and all this stuff. So oh yeah, also while all this is going on, Krampus kidnaps Damien and takes him to his little like lair and puts him in a cage, and Damien's trying to figure out how to get out. And meanwhile, the rest of the team is fighting the monsters and trying to subdue possess Superman. But then Blue Beetle is able to like recreate the chemical composition of kryptonite with his powers with the scarab, which I'm not sure if it's ever been done in the past in the comics. Let me know in the comments if it has, but this seemed new to me. But he's able to use that to weaken possessed Superman, and even like to the point where he stops his heart, and the spirits think he's dead, so they like fly away. But then they're able to resuscitate Superman and bring him back. But then one of the like this big snow monster causes a big avalanche, which buries everybody. Meanwhile, Damien decides to outsmart Krampus, and he pretends like his scaring him worked. He pretends to be a scared little kid who just wants to go back home, and he'll promise to be good. And this like starts to jog Krampus's memories of what he used to do. But just in the nick of time to save everyone from the avalanche, or at least unbury them, Wonder Woman, Joe Mullen, and Hot Girl show up. And Superman, once he comes to, kind of explains, like, he kind of understands what these beings are. He explains that many cultures not just Krypton, use the Phantom Zone to banish their threats, and the spirits have been in the Phantom Zone so long that they basically lost all, you know, corporeal form, and they kind of lost who they are even. And somehow when Krampus got banished, he got banished, and he was found by them, and they kind of took over and possessed him and influenced him. But all they have is Krampus's memories of being betrayed by Santa, and they kind of are suppressing like Krampus himself, and it's just like these memories of vengeance that they're working with. It's yeah, so that's why they're so angry. They're kind of working with Krampus's memories, but it's not really Krampus doing this. It's the spirits like absorbing his like worst thoughts. So after this, Santa reveals that he has a way to find Damien. Apparently, with like through trees, he can hear kids, which he kind of explains that like he used to be a woodsman, so he could hear what kids were saying through like wood so he knew like what kids wanted and stuff, and kind of creepy, kind of a weird magic wiretap. But anyway, so he can hear Damien through this, and he knows where Krampus is. So he opens a portal. He takes Batman, Nightwing, and Batgirl with him, and they start to fight Krampus a bit. But then Krampus is able to kind of overcome the spirits and banish them, and largely because of Damien like playing off of his desires to like scare kids into being good. So he banishes the spirits from him, and he gives Damien back to Batman. And then he kind of comes to and is like, "Where am I? What's going on?" And Santa apologizes and is like, I failed you before, but now, I'm gonna make sure that I take care of you now." Meanwhile, the monsters are still, fighting the heroes, but the heroes are able to overpower them, and Joe has some like planetoid, some uninhabited planetoid that she's gonna take them to where they can't hurt anybody. Then Santa portals again, shows up with Krampus and um, Batman, Damon, and then the rest of the crew. And Santa decides after all these events, after everything that happened, he kind of wants to go off and, for old time's sake, give out presents to kids again. And Krampus is gonna go with him. He invites Damien to go along with him because Damien like never had a childhood, and so yeah, they go off and decided to give presents to kids on Christmas Eve. But before he takes off, Santa invites all the heroes to stay at his lodge and have a nice Christmas dinner with his with each other and with his servants. And that is what happens. Everybody, even people that like weren't really there, because I think like a bunch of heroes that weren't involved in the fighting show up at the end, like Flash and Aquaman, Cyborg, and yeah, they all have a nice DC heroes Christmas dinner. That is that. That's the story. So honestly, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on this. It was a fun story. It was a lot more than I expected. It was a lot more involved. I was kind of expecting it to be, like I said earlier, just kind of like a silly little holiday thing, which in some ways it was, but there was also the whole um, mythology of like Santa Claus and Krampus, which I thought was fun. I thought it was fun to see Krampus not as like this, mythological monster, but more of just almost kind of like a scary jester in a way. And I thought it was kind of fun, just the way all the DC heroes were involved with this. And even though takes place at Christmas, it was more like a big DC mythology team up story. And I thought that was fun. I thought it was kind of cool that they made Santa Claus like kind of a badass woodsman and hunter. It's not the first story to ever do that, but it was kind of fun. Overall, I would say this was just a lot of fun. Nothing too deep, but nothing I wouldn't but it wasn't like too frivolous. I would think the only thing I didn't like love was the whole thing where Santa like Superman was like, I don't know, really into Santa and like thought he was real and all that stuff. I mean, it's kind of funny on its face, but I feel like some people, when they write Superman, kind of mistake, goodness and purity, I guess, with like childlike naivete. So I think like even though because Superman is kind of like the epitome of goodness, pure goodness, but I think some writers take it a bit too far and make him seem kind of naive and like stupid sometimes, like him still believing in Santa and stuff. Like not in a like, like yeah, he exists like Batman, but more like, in a childlike way. I've said childlike a lot, but so I didn't love that part, but it was kind of a minor thing. Yeah, overall I'd probably give this like, I don't know, like maybe a 6.57. I thought it was fun. I thought the art was really cool. Um, I loved Dan Mora's covers for this, but I also just liked the actual artwork itself. It was really good, really nice and colorful, but also had like kind of a had a style to it. There were a few different styles because there were like several artists that worked on this, but yeah, overall it was fun. And I'm kind of bummed I missed it the first time around because I definitely would have enjoyed this when I would have enjoyed reading this when it first came out. But yeah, that was fun. I think this was a great story to kind of end. It's got enough action in it to, be exciting and feel like a superhero comic story, but it had enough like feel good, just like fun stuff to fit in with the holiday season. So yeah, I really enjoyed myself, and I hope you guys did too. If you want to get the actual book for yourself, there's going to be an Amazon link in the description. But yeah, to kind of wrap things up for not just this episode, but for the year, I want to talk about my cultured picks for this week, but also I want to talk about very, very briefly. I just kind of want to mention like my favorite book of this season, of this year, that I covered on the podcast. So first of all, my cultured picks aren't new stories. A lot of times they're more newer comics that I'm reading, but these ones are actually old, from the 90s. It's actually the whole like Batman Nightfall storyline, which I mean, it's kind of been iconic. Everybody, at least most people, know what this is about, know about like Bane and all that stuff. But I never actually like read it all the way through, and I still haven't. But I recently this year, I think this year or the year before, I started like actually collecting the Nightfall issues. So I've been reading the ones that I've collected, and it's a very interesting story. I've been really liking it because obviously the main, kind of even though it kind of happened several like 14 issues in or something, it's kind of the inciting Nightfall incident is Bane breaking Batman's back. But what really leads into that is Bane releasing all of the criminals from Arkham, and Batman like wears himself out ragged trying to collect them all and put them back in Arkham. And he doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat enough. He just wears himself out, and then when he's pretty much at his lowest, Bane shows up and breaks him, which is kind of a bitch move to be honest with you. But it is all very like planned out and methodical, and it's very interesting that this introduction of Bane, because I think a lot of times he is kind of portrayed as this kind of like this bruiser brute, but he's actually very strategic and methodical. And I will say I will also recommend Night Quest, which is the storyline that happens directly after Nightfall. It's pretty much the like sequel, but sometimes kind of considered part of the same storyline, and it shows Azrael, Jean-Paul Valley, takes over the Batman mantle and makes this cool like armored suit. But he also like he has a lot to learn, and he doesn't think he does, so he's a much more like brutal and unhinged Batman. But that whole storyline is really cool. If you've never read Nightfall or Night Quest like at all, I would definitely recommend reading it because it's kind of a classic Batman story. And it is very interesting. But yeah, last little thing. I thought about this a little bit. That we covered like so many really good books this year. We covered Kingdom Come. We covered Avengers Twilight was great. Gotham by Gaslight. Just a lot of really good books that I really enjoyed. But it was really hard to narrow it down. I think if I had to choose a favorite from this season, it's kind of a toss up between Old Man Logan and The Human Target. With Old Man Logan, I mean, I'm a huge Wolverine fan. This is one of the ultimate Wolverine stories, even though it's kind of like an Elseworlds future story. But I feel like it really explores new themes with Wolverine and puts him in new situations while also still sticking to like who Wolverine is and what that character is all about. And then with the Human Target, I'd never really read anything about I never read any Human Target comics before, so I was kind of introduced to this character for the first time, even though he's a pretty old character. But I really love detective noir stories and just kind of putting that in this world, but also, involving all of these uh, classic DC heroes, especially the GLI characters that I grew up reading, was really fun, and having them have pivotal roles, not just like cameos, was really fun. And I just thought this was really cool. And Greg Harwood's art was awesome. It really invoked the time period and like style that they were trying to go for, and it was just I just really enjoyed it. I can see why that was James Gunn's favorite book of 2023. But yeah, that, or maybe it's 2022. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But that is the episode for this week, and that is the end of this season. Thank you everyone who stuck with us for all or most of the season. It's been quite a year, but here we are at the end, and we're still kicking. But also, for those of you who are newer, like, we did kind of migrate from the Cultured Pull List channel to the Cultured Universe channel, which is now the home of all of the podcasts in the Cultured Universe podcast network. So we don't currently have all of the backlogs of the Cultured Pull List on this channel yet, so if you want to check them out, go to the Cultured Pull List channel. I'll leave a link in the description. But yeah, thank you once again for joining me this episode. If you'd like to support the Cultured Nerd or our show on Patreon to help us bring you more great content, kind of help keep the lights on for us, you can go to patreon.com/theculturednerd. Thank you to all the current Patreon supporters of the Cultured Nerd. I've been your host, Michael Malillo. Thanks, as usual, to Jose Navarro for all of the awesome visual assets he came up with. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you prefer audio podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on everything. So if you want to check that out, there's a link in the description for that, or you can just search for the Cultured Pull List on your podcast catcher of choice. If you're watching this at home and want to scan one of those QR codes, the one on the bottom left goes to the Cultured Nerds social media links. The Cultured Pull List should be on there as well, or you can check the link in the description if you want to check out our Instagram. The QR code on the bottom right goes to Casual Experts, which is another brand, my brand, and I do all sorts of pop culture, nerdy, horror, comic, movie stuff on there. So if you want to check that out, I would greatly appreciate it. Once again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but thank you so much for watching this. I will see you, or you will see me, in 2025.